finally able to rest, to breathe, to feel whole. But it never quite arrives, does it? Even when we hit the targets we set for ourselves, be it financial security, social validation, or even spiritual growth, there's always another level, another improvement, another future waiting just around the bend. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. In today's video, we're going to dive into a profound idea that challenges everything you've been told about time, progress, and the very nature of existence. And why the only place life actually unfolds, the only place it's ever unfolded is right here, right now. But this isn't just a philosophical thought experiment. This is about your life. Because if you're like most people in the modern world, you've been trained to live in a state of almost there, almost happy, almost satisfied. You've been taught that fulfillment lies just ahead after the next project, the next promotion, the next vacation, the next self-improvement milestone. And so you run, you optimize, you strive, you set goals and goals upon goals. But the horizon keeps moving. What if I told you that this entire structure, this mindset of constant reaching, of deferring peace for a better future, isn't just exhausting? It's a trap built not out of malice, but misunderstanding. A collective hallucination passed down from generation to generation, reinforced by culture, economy, even religion. One that tells us, not yet, not now, keep going. But what if you could stop? What if you could wake up not someday, not next year, but right now? What if everything you're chasing already exists in this very moment, waiting to be seen? That's the journey we're going on today. We'll look at ancient wisdom from Hinduism and Buddhism, where time is seen not as a straight line, but a wheel samsara, an endless cycle of craving and suffering that only ends when you realize there's nothing to chase. We'll explore the thought of Alan Watts, who once said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet, everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. We'll ask questions that might make you uncomfortable, challenge beliefs you've held for years, and open up a space of radical presence. A space where you're not a project to fix, not a brand to build, not a goal to reach, but a living, breathing miracle, already complete. But before we begin, let me ask you for one simple gift in return: your full attention. Turn off the distractions. Put your phone on silent. Take a breath. This isn't background noise. This isn't another video to skim through before you scroll past. This is a conversation, a reflection, a mirror. And if by the end of this video, something shifts inside you, if you feel lighter, freer, more alive, I invite you to support this channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss what comes next. And if you'd like to go further, to keep this kind of content alive, you can click the super thanks button to donate directly. This channel exists because people like you believe in creating spaces for real thought, real awakening, real transformation. Every click, every share, every gesture of support keeps that space open, not just for you, but for others who are searching too. Now let's begin. Let's leave the future behind and arrive fully into now. In the modern world, success is structured like a staircase. Every step has a name: kindergarten, elementary school, high school, college, entry-level job, promotion, mortgage, retirement. Alan Watts referred to this as the great illusion of modernity, the belief that fulfillment lies ahead, always just one step further. From the moment we enter school, we're taught not to enjoy the process, but to get ready for the next level. A child in first grade is encouraged to work hard so they can reach second grade. In high school, the pressure is to maintain grades for college. Once in college, the conversation shifts toward job readiness. When you finally land a job, the game changes again. Now it's about climbing the corporate ladder. And if you climb far enough, if you're persistent, you might one day find yourself as the CEO, the partner, the founder of the success story that others envy. But here's the paradox. The higher you climb, the more disillusioned you may become. Because when you finally reach the top, you often discover there's nothing there. No summit, no fireworks. And that's where many people feel betrayed, not by others, but by the entire narrative they've been told. This phenomenon is not limited to business executives or type A personalities. It permeates every layer of society. Consider the artist who finally gets recognized by the industry but loses their passion in the process. Or the academic who publishes groundbreaking work, only to feel empty after the accolades fade. Or the retiree who spent 40 years working for one day, only to find themselves unprepared for the stillness of that day when it arrives. There's a classic example in American culture, the American dream. The dream promises that if you work hard, play by the rules, and persevere, you'll achieve success, often symbolized by a house with a white picket fence, a good job, and a comfortable retirement. But for many, this dream ends up being a treadmill. You're running, sweating. This kind of living always for tomorrow, always preparing, never being, is exhausting. But more than that, it's a systemic postponement of joy, presence, and authenticity. The tragedy is not just personal, it's cultural. A society that constantly pushes people toward future milestones is a society that devalues the present. And when the present is devalued, people become anxious, restless, and perpetually dissatisfied. You can see this everywhere. Look at the way productivity apps and life hacks have replaced reflection and mindfulness. Instead of asking, how do I feel right now? We ask, how can I be more efficient? Even downtime is monetized. People listen to podcasts on double speed, not to enjoy the content, but to finish quicker and move on to the next thing. Life becomes an optimization problem rather than an experience. One of the most telling symptoms of this culture is the question, so what's next? It's the default reaction to every achievement. You graduate, what's next? You land a job, what's next? You finish a big project, what's next? The question is not inherently bad, but when it becomes the only question, it turns into a form of psychological slavery. It implies that whatever you've done is never enough, and that your worth is tied to the next step. This is particularly dangerous because it rewires our sense of value. We stop finding meaning in the thing itself, and instead seek meaning in its utility. Reading a book is no longer about immersion or reflection. It's about whether it can get you a promotion. A vacation isn't about rest, but about collecting experiences to post online. Even relationships become instrumental networking tools rather than genuine connections. Alan Watts saw this and warned us. But as we grow older, we are taught to see the present as a means to an end. And slowly, we lose our ability to enjoy life for its own sake. The damage of this mindset is cumulative. Over time, people become alienated from themselves. They develop a split between who they are and who they think they need to become. This creates a deep inner conflict, a sense that life is always happening somewhere else. And the cruel twist? Even when you get there, that feeling doesn't go away because you've never practiced being present. You don't know how to experience fulfillment when it finally knocks on your door. There's a saying that perfectly captures this dilemma. You can't live your whole life preparing to live. Yet that's exactly what many people do. They fill their calendars, plan their retirements, and chase promotions, all in the hope that someday life will begin. But life isn't a rehearsal. This is it, right here, right now. Consider the musician who postpones joy until the next album, the athlete who postpones peace until the next win, or the parent who postpones presents until the kids move out. In all these cases, the danger is the same. You postpone until you forget what you're postponing for. And that is the core of the tragedy. What's proposed was not irresponsibility or laziness. As some critics claimed, it was radical presence. It was the idea that we must learn to live now, not later. Because later is a moving target. It's always ahead of you, like the carrot dangling in front of the donkey. You may die before you ever reach it. We need to seriously rethink what we consider success. Is it a title, a bank account, a reputation? Or is it the ability to wake up in the morning and feel genuinely alive? The latter requires a different kind of education, one that teaches awareness, attention, and presence, not just preparation. Alan Watts once said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet, everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. That panic is what our current system rewards. And unless we interrupt it, it will consume us. Reclaiming the present moment is not just a personal act, it's a cultural rebellion. It's saying no to a system that profits from our absence. It's choosing to live fully, rather than just function efficiently. It's remembering that life is not a destination, but a dance. And the music is playing right now. To live otherwise is to climb a staircase that leads to nowhere. To keep running toward a mirage. To wait for a someday that never arrives. But to live now, that is the only real success there is. In the modern world, presence is often mistaken for idleness, and stillness for weakness. We live in a society that rewards movement, productivity, ambition, and action, often without questioning their direction or purpose. As a result, many people have lost their ability to simply be in the moment. This isn't just an abstract spiritual loss. The inability to live in the present comes with real consequences. It breeds anxiety. It challenges the unspoken commandment, "Thou shalt always be doing something." The deeper issue is that when people stop valuing the present, they start seeing it as disposable. If this moment isn't inherently valuable, then it becomes a means to an end. And when life is reduced to a series of means to an end, we start to treat not only time but people, relationships, and even nature itself as tools exploitable, discardable, secondary to the goal. The inability to be present creates a moral vacuum. Because if you're always chasing the next thing, you never stop to ask, what am I becoming in the process? This constant chasing transforms people. It makes them impatient. It makes them restless. More dangerously, it makes them controlling. Why? Because the future, this ever-receding fantasy, can't be grasped. And so, we try to control everything else around us to give the illusion of progress. This is how ambition turns into domination. Take the corporate manager who can't enjoy a weekend without checking their email, or the influencer who can't eat a meal without photographing it for content. On the surface, they may appear successful or driven, but often beneath that is a deep disconnection, a fear of stopping, of being left alone with the present moment. Because what if the present isn't as impressive as their curated version of the future? What if the now doesn't perform well? That anxiety drives them to fill every silence. Rivers are not sacred, but potential sites for dams or waste disposal. We talk about natural capital as if nature only matters when it can be monetized. This isn't just greed, it's a symptom of a mindset that refuses to see value in what simply is. A tree that just grows and sways in the wind is useless in a world that only values timber. In the same way, a human being who pauses to breathe, to reflect, to be still is seen as a liability. Socially, the consequences are just as grim. When presence is devalued, relationships suffer. How many friendships fade, not because of conflict, but because neither person could slow down enough to truly connect? How many families live under the same roof, but barely share a real moment together? People are physically present, but emotionally elsewhere, scrolling through devices, planning the next thing, mentally in some other place. This absence becomes a kind of emotional violence. Children grow up unseen. Partners feel neglected. Friends feel replaced. And all of it happens, not because people don't care, but because they've forgotten how to be there. On a psychological level, the inability to be present breeds discontent. When your mind is always in the future, you start believing happiness lies there. But the future never arrives. It's a horizon that keeps moving as you approach it. So, you're perpetually unsatisfied. You tell yourself, I'll be happy when I get the job. Then it becomes when I get promoted, then when I buy a house, and so on. This kind of thinking becomes a trap. You become like a hungry ghost, mouth wide open, stomach never full. And the more you achieve, the emptier you feel. We can even see this in politics and ideology. Movements that begin with noble intentions can become rigid, aggressive. even violent when they lose their grounding in the present. When people become obsessed with a better world that must be built, they may start justifying harm in the name of that future. This is how revolutions eat their own children. This is how utopias turn into dystopias, because the dream becomes more important than the humanity in front of you. One of the more tragic outcomes of this mindset is that it creates a culture of comparison. If you're not living in the now, you're probably measuring your life against someone else's version of the future. Social media accelerates this. You're not only comparing your life to others, you're comparing your private, messy present to their curated, polished highlights. This gap between where I am and where I should be becomes a source of constant anxiety. And rather than being inspired, people become bitter, envious, or numb. But perhaps the most tragic cost of not being present is that you never really know yourself. If you're always focused on where you're going, you don't spend much time understanding who you are right now. Your identity becomes entangled with your ambitions, your roles, your output. You think you're your career, your success, your productivity. But the moment you lose those things, when you retire, get laid off, face a failure, you fall into crisis. Who are you without your resume? Who are you without your goals? This is why presence is not just a spiritual buzzword, it's a survival skill. It's the foundation for mental health, for genuine connection, for ethical living. Without it, everything becomes performative. You don't smile because you're happy. You smile because it's expected. You don't rest because you're tired. You rest because you've earned it. Even your hobbies become side hustles. You start living for validation instead of aliveness. And let's be clear, being present doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean you don't care about the future. It means you don't sacrifice your soul for it. It means you recognize that the only place life actually happens is here. Now, it means you understand that being fully engaged in the moment is the most powerful form of existence. Because in presence, you become attuned to yourself, to others, to the world. Presence allows for real listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak. It allows for real creativity, not just productivity. It allows for intimacy, not just performance. It allows for empathy because you're actually aware of the person in front of you, not just the role they play in your life. And above all, it allows for peace because you're not at war with where you are. Because presence is bad for business. If you're present, you're less likely to need to buy something to feel okay. If you're present, you might question the system. You might choose a slower life, a quieter one, and that threatens the machinery. Yet more and more people are waking up to this truth. You see it in the rise of mindfulness, of slow living, of minimalism. People are beginning to suspect that more isn't always better, that sometimes the most revolutionary act is to do nothing, to sit, to breathe, to watch a raindrop slide down the window and let it be enough. The cost of not being present is too high. It turns us into machines. It turns love into transaction, nature into commodity, and time into enemy. But presence, simple, radical presence, can bring us back to ourselves, back to each other, and back to life itself. Growth and progress are often used interchangeably in modern discourse, but they are not the same thing. Growth is a natural process. It's what happens when a tree gets taller, when a child matures, when a city expands. It follows biological rhythms, understands seasons, and eventually reaches a point of rest or renewal. Progress, on the other hand, is a human invention. It is the relentless push for more efficiency, more innovation, more control, more disruption. Progress doesn't know when to stop. It has no built-in limits. It believes every problem can be solved by doing something new, something bigger, something faster. But not all change is improvement, and not all forward motion leads to a better world. Modern society is obsessed with progress. We've been conditioned to believe that if we're not advancing, we're falling behind. This mentality is reinforced everywhere, from Silicon Valley startups that chase disruption as a virtue to political narratives that equate modernization with moral superiority. In schools, children are taught to aspire to a better future, defined primarily by material wealth and technological prowess. In business, companies are praised not for how sustainable or ethical they are, but for how fast they scale, how many markets they conquer, how much profit they produce. This blind pursuit of progress has become a secular religion, and like many religions, it demands sacrifice. The environment is one of its most frequent offerings. In the name of development, we clear forests, poison rivers, melt ice caps, and pollute the air. We tell ourselves this is necessary for jobs, for growth, for a better life. But a better life for whom? For how long? When the Amazon burns, when coral reefs die, when entire ecosystems collapse, what kind of progress is that? It's the kind that prioritizes short-term economic gain over long-term survival. It's the kind that mistakes motion for meaning. Technological innovation, while miraculous in many ways, often comes with unforeseen consequences. Social media, for example, was heralded as a revolution in communication, a way to connect the world. And it did. But it also contributed to skyrocketing levels of anxiety, depression, and polarization. Our devices keep us tethered to constant streams of information, but often at the cost of our attention span, our sleep, and our peace of mind. We are more connected than ever, and yet lonelier than ever. We have more access to knowledge, and yet seem less capable of discerning truth. These aren't signs of healthy growth, they're symptoms of runaway progress. Another example lies in the field of agriculture. Industrial farming techniques have vastly increased food production. In theory, this should mean no one goes hungry. But in practice, it has led to soil degradation, loss of biodiversity, and dependence on chemical fertilizers and genetically modified seeds. Small farmers are pushed out. Rural communities are destabilized. And while there may be more food on the shelves, it's not necessarily healthier. Obesity and diet-related diseases are rising, even in countries with abundant food. Here again, progress is revealed to be double-edged, solving one problem while creating several more. The same dynamic plays out in urban development. Cities are constantly expanding, building, modernizing. Skyscrapers go up, highways multiply, neighborhoods are gentrified. But with this comes the loss of local culture, increased inequality, and disconnection from nature. Children grow up without ever seeing stars in the sky. Seniors are isolated in high-rises. People commute for hours in traffic-choked streets. There's a peculiar irony to modern cities. They're filled with people, but few feel a genuine sense of community. The more we build, the more fragmented we become. Even in the realm of medicine, where progress has undoubtedly saved lives, the story is more nuanced than we often admit. Yes, vaccines, antibiotics, and surgical advancements have transformed human health. But the medical-industrial complex has also become a profit-driven behemoth. Patients are treated like customers. Doctors are incentivized to prescribe rather than heal. And pharmaceutical companies wield enormous power. Mental health, for example, is often medicalized rather than understood in social or spiritual context. A person suffering from existential despair might be given a pill rather than a community, a purpose, or a listening ear. War, too, has been rebranded in the name of progress. Military technology is developed under the banner of defense, yet its use is often offensive. Drones, surveillance systems, and cyber warfare have made conflict more remote, more sanitized, and, paradoxically, more dangerous. The ability to kill from a distance has removed the visceral reality of violence, making it easier to justify. And while we talk about spreading democracy and stability, the result is often chaos, displacement, and trauma for the people on the ground. Progress in warfare doesn't mean peace, it means more efficient destruction. So why do we persist? Why do we keep pushing the lever forward, even when the alarm bells are ringing? Part of it is psychological. Humans are narrative-driven creatures, and the story of progress is deeply embedded in our collective imagination. It tells us that tomorrow will be better than today, that science will save us, that innovation is inherently good. To question this is to sound like a Luddite or a cynic. And so we suppress doubt, celebrate every breakthrough and ignore the mounting costs. But another reason is economic. Our financial systems are built on the assumption of perpetual growth. Stock markets expect quarterly gains. Corporations are legally bound to maximize shareholder value. Governments measure success by GDP. These metrics do not account for ecological balance, mental well-being, or social cohesion. They only reward expansion. As a result, even well-meaning leaders find themselves trapped in a system that punishes restraint and rewards exploitation. There's also a cultural component. We admire the innovators, the disruptors, the risk-takers. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. These figures are lauded not just for their wealth, but for their audacity to change the world. And change they have, but at what cost? The gig economy has eroded labor protections. Algorithmic management has dehumanized workers. Surveillance capitalism has monetized our attention. The conveniences they've created are undeniable, but the externalities are profound. None of this is to suggest that all progress is bad. Scientific discovery, artistic expression, and technological invention can enrich our lives in countless ways. But progress without reflection is a runaway train. If we don't pause to ask where we're going and why, we may arrive at a destination we never intended, a world of convenience, but no connection, of speed, but no direction, of abundance, but no meaning. There are signs of hope. Movements for sustainability, ethical tech, slow food, and regenerative farming are gaining traction. People are beginning to ask deeper questions about the kind of world they want to live in. But these voices are still on the margins. The mainstream still worships at the altar of progress, often without acknowledging its darker side. We need a new definition of progress, one that includes wisdom, restraint, and reverence. One that measures not just what we build, but what we preserve. One that values not just innovation, but also continuity, care, and community. True progress should make us more human, not less. It should deepen our connection to the earth, not sever it. It should broaden our compassion, not just our capabilities. The most dangerous idea of our time is not a radical ideology or a fringe conspiracy. It is the belief that forward motion is inherently good. This belief has led us to extract, to dominate, to accelerate beyond reason. But just because something is new doesn't mean it's better. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. Sometimes, wisdom lies in stopping, in looking back, in listening. Progress is only meaningful if it leads somewhere worth going. Otherwise, it's just motion for motion's sake. And there's nothing inherently noble about going faster if we've lost sight of what truly matters. In many traditional societies across Asia, Latin America, and Africa, there exists a cultural rhythm fundamentally different from the one that dominates in the West. It is slower, less obsessed with output, and more attuned to cycles of nature and human need. People in rural China, India, or among indigenous Mexican communities often work hard when necessary during planting season, harvest time, or when a communal task requires many hands. But once the basic needs are met, they rest. They gather. They celebrate. They let time pass without the pressure of having to do something productive every second. To many in the industrialized West, this looks like laziness. But what if it's something closer to wisdom? Western culture, particularly since the Industrial Revolution, has idolized the work ethic, especially the Protestant version that frames hard work as a form of moral virtue. Doing less is seen as morally suspect. Productivity becomes synonymous with value, and rest is seen as a reward you must earn. This view is so deeply embedded that many people feel guilty when they're not doing something, even when resting is exactly what they need. We glorify hustle culture, idolize multitasking, and fill every blank space in our calendars with commitments. The idea of working just enough and then stopping seems irresponsible or even self-destructive to a Western audience. But this judgment is built on an assumption that the purpose of life is to maximize achievement, wealth, or influence. If, instead, the purpose of life is to experience it fully, to connect with others, To find peace, then working just enough makes perfect sense. It is not an act of laziness, but of intentionality. Consider the Japanese cities of Tokyo, Osaka, or Kobe, once symbols of post-war industrial success. These cities became global economic powerhouses, but at a steep cost. Smog blankets the skyline. Rivers that once sustained communities now carry pollution. People commute for hours in overcrowded trains. Work culture has become so intense that Japan had to invent a term for death by overwork: karoshi. And yet, even with all this toil, the birth rate is declining, mental health issues are rising, and many young people report feeling disconnected from any sense of purpose. This is the paradox of industrial modernity. More wealth, more productivity, more innovation, but less meaning, less connection, less joy. Meanwhile, in parts of rural India or southern Mexico, people continue to live in what might seem like material poverty by Western standards, but often with stronger family ties, deeper spiritual practices, and a healthier relationship to time. They work when needed, but don't structure their entire identity around labor. Time is not something to be conquered, but something to live with. Seasons matter. Festivals matter. Rest is not a luxury, it's a natural part of the human experience. This slower pace of life often allows for things the West has forgotten how to value: storytelling, intergenerational wisdom, communal meals, spontaneous celebration, and deep stillness. You don't need a mindfulness app or a meditation coach when your daily life already includes long pauses, walks through nature, or sitting in silence at dusk. Presence is not something to be scheduled. It is woven into the fabric of the day. Of course, this isn't to romanticize poverty or suggest that traditional societies are utopias. Many face serious challenges: lack of access to healthcare, education, or infrastructure. But that doesn't mean their cultural values around time, labor, and life priorities are wrong. In fact, it might be precisely those values that help them endure such hardships with grace and resilience. Western modernity, for all its technological brilliance, is in many ways in crisis. Anxiety, depression, burnout, and loneliness are rising at alarming rates. Despite having more tools to connect than ever before, people feel increasingly isolated. Despite having more resources, people feel increasingly insecure. The endless chase for more has created a spiritual void that no amount of money can fill. And yet, the solution we're often sold is more. More therapy, more productivity hacks, more apps to track our sleep and moods and thoughts. We're trying to fix the sickness of overdoing by doing even more. In this context, the idea of simply doing less becomes radical. It challenges the core assumptions of our economic and cultural systems. It suggests that maybe constant growth is not the answer, that maybe sustainability, balance, and enoughness are more valuable goals. This is threatening to a society that runs on consumption, competition, and the myth of infinite expansion, which is why cultures that live more slowly are often dismissed as undeveloped or backward. But what if they're not behind? What if they're ahead in a way we've forgotten how to recognize? In many indigenous worldviews, time is circular rather than linear. Life moves through cycles: birth, death, renewal. There is no rush to get ahead because life is not a race. There is only the rhythm of the seasons, the pulse of the land, and the wisdom of knowing when to act and when to be still. In the West, we talk about time management as if time is something external that must be controlled. But in these slower cultures, time is relational. It is something you move with, not something you battle against. This relational understanding of time fosters a different kind of consciousness, one that is more attuned to the present moment, to subtle shifts in mood, energy, and environment. It values intuition as much as intellect, presence as much as planning. And it creates space for beauty, for watching the light change at dusk, for listening to birdsong, for noticing the way shadows move across the ground. These may seem like small things, but they are the building blocks of a grounded, meaningful life. It's no coincidence that many of these cultures have rich artistic and spiritual traditions. Slowness allows for contemplation, and contemplation births creativity. When you're not constantly rushing, you have time to notice, to feel, to imagine. You have time to make music, to paint, to dance, to pray. You have time to grieve properly, to celebrate deeply, to love fully. These are not luxuries. They are what make life worth living. Unfortunately, the global economy often imposes Western values onto these slower cultures through development policies, media narratives, and economic pressure. Young people in rural areas are told that success means leaving their communities, working in cities, and adopting the values of speed, competition, and consumption. In the process, languages die, customs fade, and sacred sites are bulldozed to make way for modernization. The world becomes more uniform, but not necessarily more human. So perhaps the real question is not whether these slower societies are lazy or enlightened, but whether we have the humility to learn from them. Can we recognize that our way of life, while powerful, is not the only way, and certainly not the most sustainable one? Can we admit that rest, slowness, and simplicity are not signs of weakness, but of strength? The West often sees itself as the rescuer of the world, bringing progress and technology to the underdeveloped. But maybe it is the West that needs rescuing, not from a lack of resources, but from a lack of wisdom, from a spiritual poverty that no economic wealth can fix, from a disconnection so deep that it doesn't even recognize itself as a wound. Learning to slow down doesn't mean rejecting all modern advancements. It means integrating them with discernment. It means asking not just, can we do this, but should we? Not just, what will this produce, but what will it cost? It means designing systems that honor both innovation and regeneration, both speed and slowness, both doing and being. Ultimately, the ability to live slowly is the ability to live consciously. It's the choice to prioritize depth over breadth, presence over performance, relationships over transactions. And in a world hurtling forward at breakneck speed, this choice becomes not just an act of personal sanity, but a collective survival strategy. The cultures that still remember how to live this way may hold the keys to a future that is not just faster, but wiser. Not just richer, but more whole. Modern economies run not on gold, not even on real resources, but on belief, on faith in numbers, symbols, and abstract systems of trust. The entire monetary system is a performance built on shared illusion, a collective agreement that paper, or more accurately today, digits on a screen, have value. Allen Watts captured this perfectly with his allegory about the banks that lost all their gold, but continued functioning anyway, because no one bothered to check. The show went on. The books were balanced, and no one panicked because the perception of stability was more important than the reality behind it. It's both absurd and revealing. Money, at its core, is fiction. It's not backed by physical assets in any meaningful way anymore. What gives it power is our shared commitment to treat it as real. This isn't just an abstract philosophical point, it has real consequences. When we confuse the symbol for the thing it represents, we start to organize society around illusions. Money is meant to be a tool to facilitate exchange, but somewhere along the line, it became the goal itself. We don't seek food, shelter, or community, we seek money, believing it will give us those things. In doing so, we've constructed a world where the pursuit of money often undermines the very human needs it was supposed to serve. One of the most glaring examples of this disconnect is the global food system. Every year, millions of tons of food are wasted, thrown away, because they can't be sold at a profit, left to rot because they don't meet cosmetic standards, or destroyed to maintain market prices. Meanwhile, millions of people go hungry. In some countries, farmers are paid to not grow food. In others, surplus crops are dumped into oceans or burned. This isn't due to scarcity, it's due to economic logic. The system prioritizes market balance over human nourishment. If people can't afford to buy food, they're not considered part of the market demand. and the system ignores them. In other words, the real need is subordinated to the symbolic representation of value. This is what's meant by the hallucination of bookkeeping. We've come to treat numbers as more real than reality. It doesn't matter that we have enough food, energy, or shelter to support far more people than we currently do. What matters is whether the numbers add up. Nations sit on mountains of surplus while others starve, not because they lack resources, but because the flow of money says no. It's like watching someone die of thirst beside a locked water fountain, not because there's no water, but because they can't insert the right token. The modern stock market provides another stark illustration. Stocks rise and fall not based on the tangible health of a company, but based on perceptions, forecasts, and psychological reactions to data points. A company can lay off thousands of workers and watch its stock price soar because investors interpret the move as increasing efficiency. Real-world suffering translates into virtual gains. Human lives are reduced to line items. And this isn't viewed as unethical, it's viewed as smart strategy. The abstraction has devoured the reality. Even in personal finance, people often feel more secure seeing large numbers in their bank account than actually having a stable, fulfilling life. Someone with a six-figure income may be riddled with anxiety, buried in debt, or emotionally bankrupt, but the numerical symbols create a sense of safety. Meanwhile, someone living modestly but without debt, surrounded by community and with time to rest, is often pitted as not successful. The metric of money has replaced all other measures of well-being. This obsession with symbols extends beyond economics. In education, students are reduced to test scores. In healthcare, patients are reduced to insurance codes. In social media, self-worth is reduced to follower counts and engagement rates. Everywhere you look, the symbol has become more important than the substance. The map is mistaken for the territory, and the result is a civilization that's profoundly disconnected from life itself. Credit and debt are the most literal expressions of this disconnection. We lend money that doesn't exist, charge interest on it, and then punish people for failing to repay it. The debt isn't real in any physical sense, but the consequences are. Families lose homes. Students carry loans for decades. Entire nations are crippled by interest payments on money that was created out of thin air. It's financial alchemy, but no one questions it because the symbols look official. The numbers appear on government reports, on pay stubs, on screens, and we treat them as if they're sacred truths. This creates a kind of mass psychological conditioning. We behave as though we are free, but we are bound by abstract chains. People stay in jobs they hate, relationships that suffocate them, or cities that drain them. All for the sake of a number. I need this much money to feel safe. And yet, for many, no number is ever enough. As soon as you reach it, the goalpost moves. You get the promotion, but now you need the house. You get the house, but now you need to renovate. You retire with savings, but inflation erodes your sense of security. The treadmill never stops because the symbol is inherently unstable. It's designed to demand more. And yet, we rarely stop to ask, what is money, really? Where does it come from? Who decides its value? The answers are surprisingly arbitrary. Central banks print it. Governments inject it. Markets speculate on it. It's a game of perception, not a reflection of intrinsic worth. A dollar bill is worth $1 because we all agree to pretend it is. But that agreement has taken on the weight of law, morality, and even identity. Children are taught to aspire to wealth from an early age, not because it leads to a meaningful life, but because it offers protection within the system. College is pursued not for knowledge, but for better earning potential. Talents are monetized. Hobbies become side hustles. Even spirituality is commodified, packaged into courses, retreats, and branded lifestyles. Nothing is allowed to exist simply for its own sake anymore. And still, the system feels fragile. Financial crashes happen with alarming frequency. Currencies collapse. Banks fail. And when they do, the illusion becomes briefly visible. We see that the emperor has no clothes, that the wealth we chase is mostly vapor, But rather than reinvent the system, we double down. We prop it up, bail it out, and continue the performance. Because the alternative, acknowledging the fiction, feels too destabilizing. So we continue living in this mirage, measuring success in numbers, building identities on credit scores, judging countries by GDP rather than well-being. And in doing so, we ignore the real wealth that exists all around us. Clean air, time with loved ones, shared meals, creative expression, rest. These things can't be quantified easily, and so they're dismissed as secondary. But they are, in truth, the foundations of a meaningful life. Alan Watts wasn't against money, he was against the fetishization of it. He saw how the tool had become a tyrant, how the medium had replaced the message. He urged people to return to a direct experience of life, unmediated by abstraction. To see money as a means, not an end. To remember that you can't eat a dollar bill, can't find peace in a portfolio, can't truly live by chasing zeros. The real tragedy is not that we use money, it's that we've forgotten its place. We've built civilizations around it, crafted moral hierarchies from it, and allowed it to dictate who gets to live well and who doesn't. But money, like language, is just a symbol, a tool. Its power lies not in itself, but in how we use it. And if we continue to let it define our lives, we risk becoming mere characters in a spreadsheet accounted for, but never truly alive. The idea that the future is where life will finally begin is one of the most widespread and destructive illusions in modern life. We are constantly told to plan ahead, to save for retirement, to work now so we can enjoy ourselves later. But later never really arrives. The present moment, the only place where life actually unfolds, becomes a waiting room. And we sit in that waiting room for decades, hoping the door to real life will eventually open, only to realize that the door was always an illusion. There is no future moment where everything clicks, where we become whole, where peace settles in like a long-awaited guest. There's only now. There has only ever been now. This is not just philosophical rhetoric, it's an observable truth. Every experience we've ever had, every decision we've ever made, has happened in the present moment. The past is memory. The future is projection. Both exist only in the mind. And yet, our culture conditions us to live almost entirely in these mental constructions. We relive past mistakes. We worry about future outcomes. We rehearse conversations, imagine scenarios, plan, optimize, project, and speculate. And in the process, we abandon the present. We trade what is real for what is imagined. In Hindu philosophy, samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, is not just a literal reincarnation system. It is also a metaphor for psychological entrapment. As long as you believe in time as an absolute, linear reality, you are bound by it. You're always looking forward or backward, never simply being. You are reincarnating emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, never landing in this moment, never arriving fully into yourself. Liberation, moksha, comes not from escaping the cycle of time in some far-off heaven, but by waking up to its illusory nature here and now. The same idea appears in Buddhism with the concept of dukkha, the suffering that arises from craving and attachment. And what is craving, if not a fixation on the future? We crave what we don't yet have. We fear what we might lose. We cling to what we hope will make us whole. But all of this exists only in a temporal projection. The Buddha's answer was not to escape into some cosmic future, but to return to the breath, to the body, to the present. Because this is the only place suffering can be understood and transcended. In everyday terms, you don't need to study scripture to recognize this. Think of the last time you were truly present watching your child laugh, sitting by a fire, walking through the woods without your phone. In those moments, the need for future validation disappears. You don't need anything more. You aren't waiting for the next thing to begin. You're simply there, alive, whole. But how often do we allow ourselves this? How often do we delay presence because we're too busy preparing for a future that's already slipping through our fingers? Modern life is structured to prevent presence. Notifications pull us out of the moment. Calendars keep us locked in future obligations. Social media offers endless reminders of what we haven't achieved yet. And beneath all of this is a cultural voice that whispers, "You're not there yet." That voice has no finish line. No matter how much you do, it always asks for more. And the cost of listening to it is enormous. We lose time with our children. We lose connection with ourselves. We lose the ability to find wonder in simple things. Consider how often people postpone joy. I'll take a vacation when I finish this project. I'll spend more time with family after this promotion. I'll relax once I hit my savings goal. But the finish line moves. The project leads to another. The promotion demands more time. The savings goal becomes a new benchmark. It never ends. And meanwhile, the moments that truly matter slip by unnoticed. Children grow up. Health deteriorates. Friendships fade. And the life we thought we were preparing for never really arrives. One of the most powerful metaphors Alan Watts used was the image of a donkey chasing a carrot tied to a stick. The carrot dangles just out of reach, and the donkey walks endlessly forward, thinking it's about to catch it. But the carrot moves as the donkey moves. The future works the same way. We are told to chase goals, accomplishments, milestones, always with the promise that fulfillment is just ahead. But just like the donkey, we never reach it. Because the structure itself is designed to keep us moving, not to let us arrive. What's urged us to stop, to break the illusion, to see that life is not a means to an end, it is the end. The point of dancing is not to arrive at a particular spot on the floor. The point of music is not to reach the final note. The point is the experience itself, and life is the same. We are not meant to race through it. We are meant to be in it. Feel it. Breathe it. Think about how children experience time. A child can spend 10 minutes watching an ant crawl across the ground. They can find infinite wonder in a puddle and shadows on the wall. In the sound of birds. They are not thinking about college admissions or 401k plans. They are here, now. And because of that, they experience a kind of magic that adults forget. But that magic is not gone, it's just buried under layers of mental noise. Presence is not about doing nothing. It's about doing with awareness. Washing the dishes becomes a meditation when you're fully there. Driving in traffic becomes an opportunity to observe your thoughts. Even waiting in line can be a moment of rest. The content of your life doesn't have to change, only your relationship to it. And when that relationship shifts, everything becomes richer. Colors seem brighter. Music sounds deeper. Conversations feel more alive. This is not to say that planning is bad or that the future should be ignored. We need to make appointments, prepare for events, save money, and so on. But we do these things not to escape the present, but to support it. The mistake is thinking that the future is where life will happen, rather than something we navigate in order to live more fully now. Planning is a tool, not a destination. When we flip the two, we become trapped. Some of the greatest spiritual teachers, philosophers, and artists have pointed to this over and over. Jesus spoke of the kingdom of heaven as being within you. Eckhart Tolle emphasizes the power of now. Thich Nhat Hanh teaches mindful walking, breathing, and eating not as mystical practices, but as ways to return to presence. The message is consistent across traditions and cultures. Salvation is not in the future. It's here. It always has been. When Watts talks about seeing the universe in a raindrop, he is not being poetic, he is being precise. A raindrop contains everything. It reflects light, contains water from oceans and clouds, dances with gravity and surface tension. To watch it slide down a window is to witness physics, chemistry, beauty, and impermanence all at once. But to see this, you must be present. You must stop waiting for something more significant to happen, because nothing is more significant than what's happening right now. We have been trained to overlook the ordinary, to seek meaning only in grand achievements, in dramatic events, in once-in-a-lifetime moments. But meaning is not hidden in the distance. It is embedded in the fabric of now, in your breath, in the sound of your footsteps, in the warmth of sunlight on your skin. If we can't find peace in these things, we won't find it anywhere. Because wherever you go, you bring yourself with you. If your mind is restless now, it will be restless in the next job, the next city, the next relationship. This is why the solution is not external. You don't need a new career, a better schedule, or more productivity hacks. You need presence. And presence requires courage. It means facing what is here without distraction. It means sitting with discomfort without immediately trying to escape. It means accepting that this moment is enough, even if it's not perfect, especially if it's not perfect. To awaken in the present is to reclaim your life. It is to stop deferring your existence to some future version of yourself. It is to recognize that you are not a project to be completed, but a being to be experienced. That your value is not contingent on what you produce, achieve, or accumulate. That the miracle is not in the next chapter, but in the page you are on. If there's a way to save the world, it is through this shift. Not through grand political revolutions or technological breakthroughs, but through individual awakenings. You do not need to conquer the future. You need to inhabit the present. You do not need to chase the horizon. You need to realize that the sky is already above you. And perhaps the most radical thing you can do in a world addicted to progress is to stop, look around, and say, this is it. This is enough. Because it is. It always has been. If you made it this far, truly made it, with presence, attention, and an open heart, then I want you to pause and notice something. Feel your breath. Listen to the silence between my words. Become aware of your surroundings, not with judgment, but with gratitude. You just stepped outside the illusion. You've touched the edge of something real, something timeless. Not your future self, not your past mistakes, not your goals or your labels or your obligations. Just you, as you are. Now, what we've explored together in this video isn't something to believe in. It's something to experience, something to return to over and over again, until it becomes not just a concept, but a way of living, a way of seeing. Because the future, as we've discovered, is a mirage. It's always out there, always one step further. And the more you chase it, the more distant it becomes. That's not failure, it's design. The future was never meant to be reached. It's a psychological carrot dangled by culture, capitalism, and conditioning to keep you moving, consuming, achieving, never arriving. But you can step off the treadmill. You can choose presence. And no, that doesn't mean giving up on goals or becoming apathetic. It means no longer mistaking the map for the territory. No longer sacrificing the sacredness of the moment for the promise of someday. You can still dream. You can still build. You can still grow. But you do it from a different place. From stillness. From clarity. From truth. You stop running because you realize there was nowhere to run to. You stop fixing yourself because you were never broken. You stop chasing because what you were looking for was always looking back. I know that can sound abstract, maybe even mystical, but presence is practical. It's not about escaping the world. It's about engaging with it fully. It's about noticing the smell of your coffee, feeling the texture of your clothes, listening when someone speaks without planning your response. It's about watching a single raindrop slide down glass and realizing that somehow it contains everything. And it's also about courage, because being present means facing what's real. Not what you wish were true, not what you hope will happen, but what is. And that includes discomfort, fear, emptiness. But here's the gift. When you stop running from those things, they soften, they speak, they transform, and so do you. So the invitation isn't just to feel good for a few minutes. It's to change how you relate to time itself, to question the trance of becoming, to shift from being a seeker to being what was sought. You don't need another program. You don't need to optimize your morning routine. And if this video has been part of that awakening, if it helped you remember something ancient and essential inside you, then I ask, from a place of sincerity, help us spread that awakening. Click like, share this video with someone who's still caught in the loop of tomorrow. Subscribe if you haven't already. This channel is building something rare, a space for reflection in a world addicted to distraction. And if you feel called to support this kind of work in a deeper way, You can donate directly through YouTube by clicking the Super Thanks button below. Every act of support makes it possible for me to continue creating videos like this, videos that don't just entertain, but invite you back to yourself. Because the world doesn't just need more content. It needs more consciousness. And consciousness begins in the moment you stop, breathe, and notice. You are here. You always were. You always will be. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being. And above all, thank you for coming home to now.